Welcome, everyone. This is Mark Coleman, Managing Partner with Compensation Analytics, and welcome to the readout of our Sales Compensation and Performance Management Survey. This is actually a re-recording of a webinar we did Thursday morning. Unfortunately, we had some technology issues. In fact, PowerPoint froze on the fourth slide. So thank you to the person who told me years ago to always have a paper copy with all your notes on it before you start speaking. So we were able to continue with the webinar Thursday, but obviously the recording was scratched. So this is a re-recording. We've taken the poll results and just embedded them in the presentation. So that's actually probably better for the PDF download anyways. So let's continue through here. What are we going to cover? We want to talk about the objectives and the approach. Why are we doing this survey? Who took part in it? What were the findings? Summarize those findings. We had 2 poll questions that people contributed to, and then about 60 seconds on the next meeting next month. So let's get into the objectives and approach. Why do we do this? Everybody is busy, yet everyone is looking for better ways to do things. Whether it's meeting the demands of their sales leadership teams, reducing costs, simplifying their operations and improving the quality of life of the people who run the sales back office, any one of those things. So we wanted to find out what's working out there. Where are people struggling? What are the current priorities? And also begin to establish some benchmarks. I don't think the sales back office has been an area that has been studied and benchmarked very much. Certainly compensation designs, there's different associations that focus on that and so forth. But if you look in the back office, there's not a lot of good research out there, and we want to begin building a base there. So let's take a quick look at the survey itself. It was comprised of 7 sections. We basically just leveraged the comp process model. We began with some demographic information, so we knew a little bit about the company, the size, who was filling it out in terms of their responsibilities, and then we had questions in the areas of design, administration, processing compensation, reporting, servicing the field, and then analyzing the impact of the plans themselves. I'd say there was 7 sections. There was about 15 questions per section, so maybe about 100 questions. And it took about just 12 minutes for folks to complete, so they got through it pretty quick. They're all structured questions, too, with radio buttons or drop-downs, so there wasn't a lot of essay writing. And then for each of those sections, we got into what's the nature of the requirements? How complex is your operation in each of those areas? What kind of technologies do you use? How much staff is required to run it? How satisfied are you with the results you're getting? And what are your current priorities? Is this an area that needs attention, or is it something that's just doing fine? Okay, so let's move on. Take a look at the participants. We had, I would say, between 40 and 50 participants take part in the survey. This slide shows a handful of companies that participated. We covered financial services, high technology, life sciences, products, telecommunications, so we've got a very broad group here. I'd say we got about 35 complete surveys, so all 7 sections were completed, and then another 15 or so that were partial. So let's take a look at some of the characteristics of the companies that took part. So we take a look at payees. The smallest group had 75 payees, and on the other end we had a group with 30,000 payees, so quite some variation there. The average was 1,500. Not only was the average, I'd say the clumping was probably between 1 and 3,000. We said where was the majority of them. In terms of payout dollars, the smallest amount was 25 million, the largest was 1.1 billion, and average around 200 million. And in terms of staff supporting the sales comp performance management back office, from as small as 2 people, and the largest group had 68, average around 20 or so. We're going to get into that in a bit more detail later. So let's get into the results here. Taking a look at how frequently do you make major changes to your compensation plans. First of all, I realize that the definition of a major and minor change is pretty subjective. We gave a guideline that a major change means that you want to make a change to compensation such that the data you need to do that isn't currently in your comp system. Not surprisingly, most companies are doing that on an annual basis. About a third of the respondents also make major changes every 3 to 5 years, so there's some stability there for their sales force. On the minor side, about 50% of the respondents are making minor changes at the end of the year, no huge surprise there, but about a third are also making minor changes throughout the performance year. So supporting these minor changes can be a little bit of a challenge if the day-to-day operations are not fully stabilized or are consuming a lot of your resources. So let's now take a look at the performance periods that folks are using. So again, no huge surprise here. The majority of folks, over 70% of the respondents, are using an annual performance period. How about the plan designs themselves? What's the satisfaction level with the plan designs? Well, I think this is very good. We're seeing, on the rep side, 80% of the reps are between neutral and very satisfied. So that's fantastic. On sales management, not surprising here. You see this fairly frequently. About a third of sales management is below neutral. I think some of the reasons for that is they have their issues, plus they're involved in all the rep issues, so just more exposure to people who aren't excited about the plan. They have also a better understanding of things, and they're typically longer tenure as well, which can curb some enthusiasm. So let's turn now to how is the design work done. When we take a look at that, it's like 90% of people are using Excel to design and model their compensation plans. Some of the other categories include ZS Associates Maps and Javelin products, as well as Xactly and Calidus. So we take a look at the design and quota process themselves, and we ask people, how satisfied are you with your design process, your quota process, as well as the tools that you use to support that? And what we see from the design process, 84% of people are satisfied with the design process itself, which is a little bit interesting when you see a little bit later what people's priorities are. The quota process, again, we're seeing some strong satisfaction here with how that process works. Where we do see some less satisfaction and more needs is people are looking for some better tool support in design and quota processes. So when we say, what kind of tool support, what works well today, what do you wish you could do better that your current tools aren't supporting you with? I think what they're telling us here is that they're using Excel a lot. Everybody understands Excel. It's very easy to load source data into it, and it's easy to share the results. On the wish list, the ability to go against more real-life global data, handle more complex scenarios, and then pump out a whole bunch of analytics. For example, what would the total cost have been if we had run comp design X all year? Or how would this have impacted the top 5% or the bottom 5%? That's tough to do with Excel. Excel's kind of the imaginary world. And what I was hearing is people want to be able to do what if with real data and see what the impact would have on their real sales hierarchy. So going forward, we asked people what their priorities were. Improving the design process and design tools were amongst some of the highest. This next one's interesting. We said, how long does it take to implement these plan changes? And what we're hearing is that for major plan changes, 2 to 4 months. The weighted average of that was 77 days. And that's for data that's not currently in the system. On the minor plan changes, we're seeing between the 2 weeks to 2 months period. The weighted average there was 24 days. And one thing we were curious about is about half the respondents were on a commercial comp package, and the other half were on a homegrown package. We said, it'd be interesting to see if the people on the package were able to do these things quicker than the people in the homegrown, using their homegrown systems. So when we broke that data out and reran it again, it was basically identical. For minor changes, it remained at 24 days. And for major changes, it shaved 1 day off. It went from 77 days to 76 days. I think some explanations for that. People know their homegrown systems very well. They may be less ambitious with some of their requirements if they know the limitations of their homegrown systems. But nonetheless, we thought it was an interesting thing to take a look at. So we take a look at the breakout of what people are using to support sales comp. Homegrown is category number 1 for plan administration and processing. And then we see Callidus, Oracle, Vericent, Exactly, and so forth, rounding out the remainder of the pie chart. We said the other questions we asked were, how do you maintain your salespeople? What's your hierarchy? What's your system of record for all the salespeople and their relationships, the roles, and so forth? And 48%, basically the same number as we had in Homegrown for plan administration, is Oracle PeopleSoft. Another 40% or so in Homegrown, and then a couple stragglers there in some other older systems. Okay, so we asked people what were their priorities, what would they like to improve, and what are their priorities for improving their back office capabilities. Ease of use came out as the number one thing they wanted to achieve, followed by flexibility. Again, no huge surprises there. This was interesting. One of the things that makes sales comp challenging is working with all of the different data and data sources. And what we see here is that the majority, a third of the respondents, are dealing with more than 20 transaction input files. The thing that surprised me was the data quality, that the group reported very high quality data. And just some projects I've been involved with, we weren't blessed with that scenario. We had misunderstandings of mismatches, bad data coming in from non-prop providers, external providers, and so forth. And that's really a function of your business model. So when we take a look at the kind of the spectrum here of data quality, on the top end, if it's your product, your sales force, and your client, that means you've got all the data in-house, right? So a good example of that might be a career insurance shop where all of the agents are employees of the company, and all of the product systems are the company's systems, and the clients are clients of the company. Northwestern Mutual is a good example of that. In that scenario, you've got control of all three of those things, and your data quality is going to be pretty good. As we move to the left here, if you're going through distributors, that's one step removed from the data. If you're selling non-prop products and getting your transactions from somebody else, that's another step removed. And I think one of the most challenging areas is in high tech, where you're selling your product through a distributor to a distributor's client. If you have a very transactional comp design, that can make things challenging. So when we look at comp designs, typically on the right side, we see 100% commission, very transactional in nature, the comp design. And then towards the left, we see mixes, 50-50, 60-40 type mixes, and less transactional in nature given the data quality issues, more aggregate, total product sales to a group or a region or a territory, things like that. Continuing on process here, one of the other questions were, how do you figure out who to pay? Is that something you do in your compensation system? Is it captured at the time of order entry? Is it done through a preprocessor? And what we found is that the majority, over 50%, are being determined outside of the compensation system, which again is not uncommon. When we asked what were the satisfaction levels with comp processing, we see some excellent results here. According to the respondents, sales reps are very happy with timeliness and accuracy of their pay. And we actually go to service and ask, what are people calling about? This is, remember this slide. When we say, what are your priorities in the processing area of the back office, number one that came out was simplify operations. Again, not a huge surprise. Actually, I thought reduce costs might have been a bit higher, but simplifying operations makes a lot of sense. So if we now we process the comp, let's move another turn on the process model and talk about reporting and communication. We wanted to see what kinds of reports, what does the field see, and these are the most common things that most respondents are providing to the field. Most common is attainment reports. How are you doing versus quota? How are you doing versus year-to-date sales versus prior year, things like that. The statements are typically online paper equivalents of what the paper statement used to look like. So you can pull it up, view it like a PDF file, something like that. Stacked rankings, recognition reports, who's on track to go to conference, those sorts of things. Below the line is the 50% mark. So half of the group is not providing these things. Online statement drill down, performance trending, the ability to query and search details, and paper reports look like they're on their way out as well. We said, how do you develop these tools? Again, Excel is a very popular tool with this group. The majority are using Excel to get the reports out. Then business objects, Crystal Actuate, True Information, and then kind of slides off from there. We say, how do you distribute the reports? We see email is almost 50% of the group, followed by corporate portal, a vendor portal, Salesforce, and BlackBerry/iPhone. We talk about satisfaction levels. We're seeing that the statements, we're some good satisfaction there in statements. Either neutral, so we got about 35%, another 25, another 20. Yeah, above neutral is pretty darn strong there. On the performance reporting side, not as much enthusiasm. In fact, almost 20% are unsatisfied. We asked people how easy it is it for you to create new reports. This is where we start to see some things jump out. That people are having, what looks like about 35, 40%, if we combine very unsatisfied and unsatisfied together, on how easy it is for people to get new reports out to the field. So we say, well, what are your priorities? Not surprisingly, improving performance reporting. Improving statements as well, even though we saw some good satisfaction there, were amongst the top priorities. So now we go from reporting on the process model up to service, handling questions, disputes, and so forth. And we asked everybody, what were the top 3 questions you're getting from the field? And here's the responses. Number 1 was a calculation question. How did you calculate this? Or I disagree with the calculation result. And when you think back to the accuracy and timeliness questions earlier, how people were very satisfied with accuracy and timeliness, the folks that are making the phone calls may not agree with that. Number 2 was a payout timing question. And then number 3 was a policy question. Do I get paid for this? Those sorts of things. When we asked people what kind of capabilities they had in the servicing area, over 70%, not a surprise here, have published on their internal intranets kind of all of their plan details, policy details, and so forth for those in the field who want to look it up and read it. After that, it kind of sloughs off pretty quickly. The ability for the field to submit service requests, about 25% of the respondents. Workflow for adjustment approvals, about 20%. Service level reporting, case tracking software, only 15%. That surprised me a little bit. I think every company I've worked with has had that one. And then field tools for research and resolution, so they can solve their own problems. Very, very few people are doing that at this time. When we ask the field how satisfied they are with the service they're getting, we see some fantastic results. We have a very large group above neutral here, and then that's also reflecting in the priorities. And you'll see that in a few slides here. We're going to put all the priorities together in descending order, and you'll see that the service area does not pop out as a high priority, and nor should it when it's got such fantastic satisfaction levels from the field. Now we leave the service area and we talk about analyze. And this is where we take a look at how effective are our compensation plans. Are we getting the revenue lift that we expected? And also, how are we doing against budget? If we forecast $200 million in payout for the year, are we on track? And which groups of producers, sales reps, is it going to go to? So this question was, how frequently are you taking a look and reforecasting your total payouts? Is that something you do monthly, quarterly, and so forth? And you can see here that monthly was amongst the highest group. Surprisingly, the next highest group was no schedule. We kind of do it ad hoc, or if we get a warning alarm from finance that we're spending too much money. But there is a group, about a third of people are doing this on a monthly basis. This one surprised me a little bit. When making plan changes, if we're doing a spiff, or we're going to put a major change in next year, we're probably doing that because we think it's going to help us sell more. But actually tracking the expected revenue lift as a result of the comp design plan change to see if there's some correlation is not done by many people. Only about 12-13% said that they always do that, and you can see that sometimes and rarely makes up the remaining 90%, 80-90% of the group. So satisfaction levels in this area, I think even though not everyone's doing it, we're seeing pretty traditional bell curves here on satisfaction. Nothing really jumps out here as a huge problem area. Although we're seeing that it is becoming more of a priority for folks to want to be able to do those things. So when we ask people what their priorities are, the plan effectiveness piece came out stronger than the ability to forecast what the payout's going to be during the current performance period. Okay, so now let's turn. Now we've kind of gone through all the different sections. Let's start looking at some data, and this is we wanted to understand the ratio between the number of home office staff required to support a sales force of different sizes. And when we basically these are just scattergrams, and the axes represent the number of home office employees required to support everyone. So what we found was that up to 500 payees, we're seeing a smaller ratio. So we're seeing about one home office employee for every 30 payees. And we had up to 30,000 payees, but the data quality it kind of drifted off at the higher ends. When it gets above 500, that's when we see economies of scale kicking in. Maybe around 65 to 70 payees per home office employee, up to 150, 165 when you really stretch the data out towards 30, 50,000 payees and so forth. But given that our data was clumped around that 1,000 to say 3,500 payee area, kind of that 1 to 75 ratio, 65 plus ratio makes a lot of sense. So what we did was tried to fit a curve to say if we got payees down here along our x-axis, and we've got the ratio, the number of actually the ratio is the prior slide. This is the number of home office staff required ballpark. And obviously many things can influence this. If you have a pay frequency of weekly, you're going to have a lot more service calls than if you have a pay frequency of monthly. If you don't offer a lot of reporting, you're going to get a lot of ad hoc requests and calls from the field, and that's going to require more people. If you have a performance period this short, or you have huge jumps in your comp plan, so people really want to make sure they're on the right side of the bonus threshold, that's going to generate more work as well. If you have a high base component, probably not as many calls, as much work as if you were 100% commission. So there's many things that can impact where you are in this curve. So just take this as a very general type of situation. But I think the relationship's right. That is, you're going to go from a ratio of 1 to 30-ish to one of 1 to 200 and so forth as you move up to the right. Okay, so let's summarize some of the things that we found and then share some poll results. When we ask people what's working well, so the numbers in the brackets here are the sum of very satisfied and satisfied. So the highest one was the design process. The second highest, to my surprise, was data quality. Third highest, comp accuracy and timeliness, and then service. The other end of the spectrum, not working as well, performance reporting, only 26% were satisfied. Analyzing plan effectiveness, payout forecasting, and statements. So when we put all of this together, this is the priorities. So if we summed, it's a current top priority or thinking about it. In sum those two, 70% of people are either thinking about or currently working on improving performance reporting. This was an area of dissatisfaction, so we've marked it bright red. So the fact that the number one priority is the thing that is the number one dissatisfaction, that's good to see. We can see some green things down to the right, so that the things that they're happy with, they're not working on as much. Design process, as I mentioned earlier, was a bit of a fluke because it's the second highest priority, but it was also very high satisfaction. I think we had a number of people who filled out the survey were responsible for design, and I think if you're responsible for design, you're always looking for ways to improve it. So that could be one way to explain that. In terms of the current top priority, it was really simplify operations. That's our tallest blue bar, followed by plan effectiveness statements and so forth. So I thought this was really interesting to see where people's heads are at right now. So we asked a couple questions in the poll. First one is, why is performance reporting such a challenge? And we asked people to select 2 reasons from the list there. And here's what they told us. Number 1, lack of dedicated reporting resources and a tool problem. And that would make it a challenge, no doubt about it. Number 2, what needs to occur to simplify operations? The choices were clarifying process ownership, roles and responsibilities, redesigning processes end-to-end, leveraging better use of technology, reviewing outdated business policies. It's amazing on that one how much you can simplify things very quickly. Eliminating redundant activities, and redefining the services offered in the mission of the operations group. And the answer was, most important was redesigning processes end-to-end, leveraging better use of technology, which I think is great to see. Very often I see companies looking at technology to solve their problems when they really have a rat's nest that they need to sort out, figure out what they're going to keep doing, stop doing, simplify. And then once they've straightened all that out, go automate what's left. Often you just go technology shopping without thinking about how to improve your operation. You end up with a migrate the calculation project, and end up not being as happy as you could be. So that's the results of the poll. Our next meeting will be in late July. This video will be available in the video library, and you can also download a PDF copy of this presentation. Next meeting is going to be about streamlining and optimizing sales comp. So these are kind of the common practices. Now let's go find out what are truly the best practices across that process model. So the meeting will be July 27th at 10 o'clock Central Time. And if you have any questions about the survey, feel free to email me at any time. Thank you once again. Take care.